Well, summer is here, and that should mean our cities' downtowns are full of people out enjoying the weather, going to restaurants, and supporting local stores. But the problem in Regina is many people just don't think they have a reason to go downtown, or they avoid it altogether. So today on the show, we're going to be talking about the decisions made at City Hall that affect the vibrancy of Regina's downtown.
When you walk around the lake in Regina, you see people engaged, you see people happy, you see people moving, talking to one another. When you walk down the streets in downtown Regina, you don't see that energy or engagement.
So we'll be joined by some civic politics watchers and the head of Regina's Downtown Business Improvement District. But we also want to hear from you. If you have visited downtown Regina lately, what was your impression? How does it compare with other downtowns you visited? And what do you see as the major differences? You can call 1-800-716-2221. You can also email bluesky@cbc.ca. Well, our guests today spend a lot of time thinking about what makes a vibrant downtown and what decisions are made by cities that either support or hinder that vibrancy. Vanessa Matthews is Associate Professor in the Department of Geography and Environmental Studies at the University of Regina. Vanessa, welcome to Blue Sky.
Thank you.
Paul Deshane covers civic politics in Regina and is the host of the community radio show and podcast, the Queen City Improvement Bureau. Paul, hello.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good. I followed your work. It's so good to finally talk to you. It's great to have you today. Thank you. And then we also have Judith Veresuk, is the Executive Director of the Regina Downtown Business Improvement District. Judith, hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, this is going to be a great conversation. And you know that I'm based in Saskatoon, but I've spent many, many years in Regina, a city I love dearly. And of course, we're a provincial show. So some of our listeners may not have visited Regina, in the last few years. And some may have not been there in a while. So I'd like each of you to kind of set the scene for us. What would you see if you went down to downtown Regina on any given day during the summer? Judith, I'll start with you.
Well, right now you're seeing a lot of construction. I look out my window and I see a lot of diggers, excavators, dump trucks. 11th Avenue is undergoing a generational improvement. So we're certainly excited to see that construction happening because it's much needed. The streets were failing and the pipes underneath were even older than that. So we're happy of that construction, but it certainly causes a lot of inconvenience for the businesses that line the street and employees that have to get to and from downtown. It does definitely impact their commute. But what I see every day are a lot of construction workers and a lot of construction equipment.
Yeah. What about beyond the construction workers and their equipment? Do you see other people? How vibrant is Regina's downtown these days?
It certainly is a challenge. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I think there's still a strong office presence when I go out during the good weather days. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of questionable weather with the wind and the rain here in Regina the last couple of weeks. But whenever we do get the sunshine, we do see a lot of folks out, enjoying lunch in the park, in the plaza, on FW Hill Mall, making their way to and from whether it's a bricks and mortar restaurant or to the hot dog cart or to the farmers market. It's those shoulder times. So, after 5 o'clock, which is something that we were challenged with before construction and before COVID, because we are primarily an employment center and not necessarily a residential area for the city. That's always been a challenge. It's just exacerbated right now, especially with the construction, making it a little bit difficult for people to get downtown.
Yeah, fair. Paul, how would you describe Regina's downtown to someone who hasn't been there for a while?
Geez, it's sorry, Judith. It's struggling right now. Like I can remember 2010 through 2015, where you really felt this sense of optimism downtown. And in the wake of the downtown neighborhood plan and the official community plan, there was a lot of sort of energy behind building. There were food trucks on the plaza, and I think there was this real sense that downtown was up and coming. One of the things you've seen post-COVID, I don't think it's a secret, you see a lot more people, not just in downtown, but in general in the core, who are in some degree of distress, or, a lot of people who are having the worst day of their lives for the third day in a row. And it's heartbreaking, and I think this is like a problem that downtowns and cities across Canada and North America are experiencing right now. But I think for some people, this creates this sense that downtown is kind of sketchy and a place that you should avoid, when really these are the people they're the ones who are like the victims of crime. They're the ones who are like, they're the ones who are like suffering for whatever reason. They're not people to be concerned about for your safety. They're people to be compassionate for. So I don't know. It's like you go downtown and you sort of like see in microcosm, a lot of the sort of challenges that Canada is facing right now.
Yeah, yeah. Vanessa, how would you describe Regina's downtown right now?
Yeah, I think, I go to the downtown and I see a lot of potential, and that's often how I think about it. And I think just to not repeat, but to build off of what was already kind of said, part of that is that, we have about 47% of the land use being parking. And that doesn't add a lot of vibrancy. I think we have that ebb and flow of population that when we have people using these spaces, it's amazing and it feels alive suddenly. And then there's other times that you go down to the downtown area and it feels like there's nobody there. And so it really, it's something that we really need to kind of work on is how do we make that a destination all the time, not just at peak times or not just during a festival or during lunchtime or when the office workers are leaving. So it's really trying to think about it on a broader kind of scale.
The people, parking lots, we're going to dig into both those topics quite a bit more. But I'm wondering in general, Vanessa, what are the building blocks of a great downtown? Because when I think of Regina, I'm picturing it right now. You've got the Central Library. There's this fantastic playground for kids in Victoria Park. We've got Scarth Street, which you can walk down so it feels safe as a pedestrian. You got that beautiful plaza with that new bathroom that was just built. So there are things that I see in Regina that I'm like, there's a lot of there are some really great things downtown. So what would you say are some of the building blocks of a great downtown?
Yeah, I think that you're right. We have all of the ingredients, right? And one of the biggest things that we're lacking right now is people. We have been continuously losing population in the downtown. So between like the most two recent census years, so 2016 and 2021, we lost 36% of our downtown population. We're down to only 430 people that are now living there. When we think about fantastic, amazing downtowns, there's people, right? And there's people enjoying all the spaces that we have. And when people come to visit Regina and they see what we have in the downtown, they're always really amazed, I think, that we have this fantastic park and we have this pedestrian-only mall and we have all of these amenities sometimes, throughout the year as well that people should be enjoying more, but we need to get people actually living in that downtown. So that's what it is for me. It's, we have the amenities. Now we have to kind of work on getting people either that are living in the city to come to that space, and then also to create spaces for more people to live in that area too.
Vanessa, do you have any idea why people moved away from downtown?
I think that a lot of downtowns across North America suffered from similar types of changes. We've been growing outward, and that's been largely where our growth has happened in the city. So we've had about 90% of our growth in the last decade has happened in greenfield sites. And we haven't really created the tools that were necessary in order to build capacity in the core. We're starting to do that now with the Housing Accelerator Fund and some of the changes to land use bylaws. So enabling different types of growth to happen in core areas. But I think that movement out was very pronounced across the country and across North America. The difference here is that in most of those places, people came back, right? And so now we're working on the people coming back kind of part of it.
Paul, you follow City Hall very closely, and so what has Regina's council done or not done to make it attractive to live downtown?
Oh, that's a good question. I think there was, so the parking that Vanessa brought up, I think that's hugely important, that we have over the decades prioritized giving places for cars to sit idle during the day instead of places for people to engage. I brought this up a second ago. We passed in 2009 the Downtown Neighborhood Plan, which I drank the Kool-Aid on that document. I thought it was great. And it was called Walk to Work. And so the idea behind that document was that people would live downtown, and then they could also work in a nearby office tower. And they would walk between the two, and there would be all these services between them. And I really think that Council had a lot of vision when they passed that, and administration had a lot of vision. And unfortunately, fulfilling that vision, there hasn't been the resources poured into that in the way that I personally would have liked to have seen.
What kind of resources, Paul, though, would be necessary to make that kind of plan a reality? Because it is one thing to see something on paper, and I have drank the Kool-Aid about some projects in Saskatoon as well, and have imagined sort of these vibrant spaces, and then I don't understand what gets in the way. So what do you think would be the resources that would help bring those plans to life?
I think we need housing downtown, and I think that I'm hoping that with the housing accelerator money that the federal government has released to cities like Regina, like Saskatoon, that this will be, these can provide these incentives to start building in and close to downtown. I really think that I'm growing skeptical of beautification and big projects that are supposed to draw activity. I think you need people actually living there. So what I would personally like to see is I would like to see money invested in kickstarting some kind of housing development downtown. We had the Capitol Point that was supposed to have condos at the corner of Albert and Victoria, and that failed. And if that could have been transformative if it had actually happened. And I would also like to see, changes in the way that we do taxes and fees so that vacant lots and parking lots are no longer basically incentivized by being cheap. These things are a drag on our economy, and the cost to hold them should be commensurate with the amount of damage they do by existing. So I think between those two things, incentives for housing and I don't want to call it punishments, but a stick for people who are letting land sit idle and unused, I'd like to see those two things.
Judith, what do you think it would take to get more people to live downtown? And I'm curious about the role that City Hall plays in getting people downtown.
Well, like my two co-presenters today, I totally agree. Housing is key. We need more people living downtown, more people using downtown as that third space, if you will. People will follow people, right? So when you have people living downtown, it feels more safe. It may not necessarily be, basically. It's just that perception of safety that's really hurting us right now because it is quite empty and desolate after 5 o'clock. So you're going to feel more comfortable walking to your car or walking to the restaurant you're going to if you're walking with a crowd of people or walking through a bunch of people that have a lot of energy and are enjoying themselves rather than walking through an empty plaza or an empty parking lot. So having those people here after 5 o'clock is so important, and it's, I guess, easier to keep them here after 5 if they're living downtown. So in terms of incentives, I know those are things that we're working with city administration on. We did a lot of research into other downtown incentives offered by other communities, and we're very hopeful that a report coming to council in September will identify some of those best practice incentives that will stimulate things like housing or the development of a post-secondary institution in our downtown. We hope that that will be adopted by council. And going back to your question about what can council do, they need to have the political will to put the dollars behind this. So when you're moving forward with a incentive budget of $200,000, but the demand is $2 million. I mean, $200,000 is a drop in the bucket. So I think having a council and an administration that prioritize development in downtown is a benefit to the entire city, because downtown then becomes less of a drag, if you will, on the taxes. I think these investments that the city is making, especially on 11th and eventually Sask Drive, are long overdue, and those will help development because they're increasing capacity of all those wonderful pipes underneath the ground that you need. So when 500 units are put onto the street, they can all flush a toilet and not overflow everyone's sewers and all of that stuff. So the city is making the right investments. They're very long overdue, but, better late than never.
What kind of talk is happening right now about bringing a post-secondary campus to the downtown? Again, I'm not in Regina, so maybe I'm not privy to some of these conversations, but how far along are those talks?
I'm sure they're extremely preliminary. I mean, I'm just spitballing on this.
Yeah.
I'm coming from a community that made a concerted effort back in the early 2000s to bring their college to their downtown. They took over a city facility, the city auditorium, placed their creative arts campus in their downtown. Within 10 years, the university followed with their law school, their music school. So I think there's a lot of examples throughout Canada where you had post-secondary institutes or schools within the post-secondary in the downtown that helps stimulate that youthful presence in the downtown. And, students want to live close to where they're going to school. So you have a built-in market for the residential that we want to bring in.
Yeah. Saskatoon has a movie theater downtown. Regina does not.
Regina has the Regina Film Theatre in the Regina
yes.
Public Library.
Good point. And I used to attend films there all the time when I lived very close to downtown. So you were correct, Judith. Vanessa, just getting back to the housing piece, I'm wondering about how important it is to bring a diversity of people to the downtown who are wanting to live there. So thinking of people with kids. And I think you maybe mentioned that downtowns have to be dog friendly, and so you need green space. You need it to be more than just high-rise buildings for single people. Is that correct, Vanessa?
Yeah, I think you certainly want to have a social mix that is part of the downtown, and having different kinds of buildings. So some rentals, some condos that are there, different kinds of units, I think would help in that regard, and then building spaces so that you can attract families with kids, and so we have these fantastic public spaces that we've talked about already, and how can we create programming then on those public spaces so that people are coming consistently to the downtown and can see then that they can make that space a home, right? So I think you do kind of want to have that mix for sure.
Yeah. All three of you today, feel free to jump in at any point on this program if you have thoughts that you want to add to the conversation. So don't hesitate to chime in at any point here. We've got an email from Chris that I want to share with you. So Chris writes, listening to your episode today on Regina's downtown. Well, I can't say much about Regina. I live in Saskatoon, and there are two reasons I avoid going downtown as much as possible. The first is a lack of parking, especially free parking, which will get so much worse if they build the arena. And the second is the homeless problem. I have experienced threats of violence randomly and have yet to ever see a police patrol. Want people to go downtown? Make it free and make it safe. That's from Chris. A couple of points there that I want to pick up on because parking lots have come up, but then the conversation around parking and whether or not you can find a parking spot no matter what city you're in. Saskatoon people complain about that all the time. I'm not sure how many complaints you get about whether or not there's available parking in Regina. But what are your thoughts on that? What does parking and the amount it costs to park downtown, what does that do to people's willingness to come downtown? Vanessa, I think that's a good question probably for you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have a lack of parking by any stretch. I think when you get to the point where you're at 47, like almost 50% of your downtown is parking, then, we certainly have enough stalls. They did a parking study that kind of came back and said, we have enough stalls.
They did the same in Saskatoon, though, and people still say there's not enough parking.
Yeah,
so and it's still a thing.
I think part of that is that people need to kind of get used to not parking immediately in front of the destination that you're going to. And so, in other cities, it's routine if you are going to bring your car that you will have to walk a little bit, and that should be part of how we experience a downtown.
But you have to pay for it.
You have to pay for it for sure. And I'm not against paying for it at all. I think that downtowns do need to be a lot more walkable and accessible through public transit and active transportation, and those are the things that we really should be working on, especially if we're wanting to hit our commitment of becoming a renewable city by 2050, and we're wanting to kind of of take account of some of the neighborhood plan that we've passed and the official community plan that we've passed and the social and well-being plan. Like, it's all of these plans have at their very center this understanding that it's about people and the movement of people, especially in regards to downtowns. And so, the movement of people not through vehicles is something that I think allows there to be a much greater vibrancy in public life. So, I know that we have a lot of discussions in Regina as well about parking. I think we really need to kind of open our minds up to what possibilities can exist for a downtown if we're not just planning them around vehicles.
Okay, I'll put some questions to Judith and Paul in just a second. I'm Leisha Garbinski. You are listening to Blue Sky here on CBC Radio 1. Feel free to join the conversation. We are talking about downtown Regina, but this conversation applies to really any city. What takes you downtown? Why do you avoid it? And what would be an incentive that would bring you downtown? We'd like to hear from you. 1-800-716-2221. You can also email bluesky@cbc.ca. Let's go to a caller because this connects to the conversation we were just having around parking. So Ingrid joins us right now in Regina. Ingrid, welcome to Blue Sky.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to say that I think parking is crucial. When people can get free parking at all the suburban shopping centers and they can get all that they need, in quotation marks, in those suburban shopping centers, they and I, feel like we don't want to pay a lot for parking or pay anything for parking. So I'm wondering if a system of, I think that's why not many people go downtown. I think two reasons. There aren't, maybe they should be building the parking centers up instead of out, because you're taking up so much land for parking, which is a terrible waste. So probably we need more vertical parking spaces. And then I think a lot of cultural things downtown would bring a lot of people downtown. So more, and I like the idea of the university, but also say, the Globe already has theater school, but maybe dance schools and so forth, a bigger theater. Regina Public Library has a great theater and great programming. But in addition, it might be good to have a bigger theater, to bring people down. But I think parking, you have to, certainly people have to be controlled. Like, you can't have someone parking there all day. Mm-hmm. So I think there has to be some kind of control. But I think if you're going to charge people, you won't get people downtown very easily. So
Ingrid,
that's my main point. Thank you.
Thanks for making that point. I appreciate it. Take care, Ingrid. Paul, do you think paying for parking downtown is a barrier? Is that a reason why people don't go? Like Ingrid said, you can go to the big box stores in the East End. You don't have to pay there.
Yeah. So the big box stores, I think one of the ironies there is that you go to them, and I don't think because of the way they're laid out, we recognize just how far you have to walk from where you actually park your car to the actual door that you're going to. You're walking quite far. These are huge parking lots at the big box stores. When you spend time in other cities, though, that have like downtowns, like I used to live in Edmonton for a long time, and we would go downtown even if we had to spend like $6, $12, whatever it was back in those ancient days.
I think it's more like a lot more than that now, probably, to park there.
But it was, it was like a significant hit for my income at the time. But at the same time, you wanted to be downtown. There was stuff there that you wanted to go to, so you were willing to pay for the parking. You were willing to pay to be in a parking garage, too. So I think that if you have the services, if you have when you have the people living there and you have the services and the amenities that they need, and you have that vibrancy in your downtown, people are willing to pay for parking. People are willing to pay for a lot of things. We're willing to pay for cars, right? Mm-hmm. So I think I hate to say this because I understand where Ingrid is coming from, but we feel entitled to a free parking space. But when you add up the fact that your car needs a free parking space at your home, and then it is going to need a free parking spot for each of the places you visit in a day, you think about how much space needs to get asphalted over in your city to accommodate that. and we don't pay for that, like that's an enormous expense. And we need to like start rethinking the way we treat land in our cities.
Also, does this come back to what kind of experience you're expecting to get? So if I go out to the East End in Regina, I'm probably running errands and buying groceries at Superstore and heading home to put milk in the fridge as soon as possible. If I'm going downtown and I'm grabbing some carrots and then I'm shopping for a new shirt and grabbing a latte and meeting a friend, like those are two very different experiences. So Judith, I'm just wondering what your thoughts are and if you can maybe connect the dots between parking that people want to talk about and are concerned about the price attached to parking, but also how that relates to the type of experience people should be getting in a downtown.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there. We need to connect the dots. When you have like a single destination, paying that $2 an hour or whatever it might be at a parking deck or a surface parking lot becomes a little bit more onerous. But when you're making a day of it, because you're doing exactly what you said, you're going to the farmer's market, you're going to go to the Cornwall Centre after, and then maybe you'll hit one of the shops on Hamilton. Now that $6 you paid is not so onerous. So we need to fill in the gaps. And I think that's what the challenge is for all of us here. So, I would love to see, Scarth Street and Hamilton Street filled with shops and stores and restaurants. So when you come down and you pay at the meter or pay at the lot, you're hitting, 8 different stops. And then it becomes more worthwhile, and it's your experience. I think right now the challenge is that there's only one place you might go. Right. And then if the parking spot isn't right there, now it's, your perception is I'm walking so far and I got to pay for it. And it just becomes negative perception.
I want to ask you, Judith, about safety, because that was the other thing that Chris brought up in his email. And I know that you've recently revamped your downtown street team. So, Judith, I just want to ask you how that's going.
I thank you for asking about that. And the way that Paul put it, we're seeing people having the worst day of their lives, like 3 days in a row. And that really is a compassionate way to think about it. And that's the way we think about it at our own organization. And that's why the Regina Street team mandate is what it is, meeting people where they're at without judgment and with compassion and trying to get people the help that they need. So with the revamp, we've went from, I think, a team of 4 or 5 to a team of 15. And they now have a van to make it easier to transport people and to get to a wider area of coverage because before we were just downtown and now we're kind of creeping into Heritage Neighborhood, Cathedral, Warehouse District. So it certainly is challenging. And while I am happy that the team has expanded, it's also very sobering that the team had to expand because the need is so great. And honestly, we could probably hire another 15 people on top of the 15 people we have and still not cover as much ground as we need to in our community. Mm-hmm. These are challenges that are being faced across Canada, and honestly, they're challenges that are like medical, like they're from the province or federally, and unfortunately municipally, and then like down to community-based organizations. We're the ones that are facing the brunt of it and are doing what we can because these are our brothers and sisters on the street that need help.
Yeah. I'm Lisa Grabinski. You are listening to Blue Sky here on CBC Radio 1. We are talking about downtown, specifically Regina's downtown, but I do think this conversation applies to any city. And I know as I'm listening to all three of you today, it's making me think of Saskatoon. If you would like to share your thoughts on what takes you downtown or what keeps you away, 1-800-716-2221. You can also email bluesky@cbc.ca. Now, part of the spark for this conversation is the debate that's happening right now. Should Regina open up Scarth Street pedestrian mall to traffic? CBC went and spoke to some folks downtown, and this is what they said about the idea.
What are your thoughts about, opening this up to cars?
Madness.
The other option is keeping it the way it is.
Keep it the way it is. It looks gorgeous. Like, look at this. Nice foot traffic going around everywhere. People happy. Little hot dog cart in the back there. We should just keep it like this.
Yeah, I think it's good, but I don't see really an issue with it.
I don't think they should, because where's everybody going to shop? You know, if all the vehicles are be parking in here, where they got shop, all the stores would be all closed down. I like it down the middle. Then visiting with people downtown, it's kind of nice.
So I know, Judith, you are not taking a position on this debate because your organization represents a whole lot of opinions. So I'm going to go to Vanessa and Paul for this one. Paul, what's your take? Cars or no cars on Scarth Street?
Thanks for asking. This is totally going to get me in trouble with people like Vanessa, who I like and respect. I'm actually not opposed to putting cars back on Scarth Street. I think it's okay, I don't own a car. I've never owned a car. I don't want to own a car. I think cars are at the root of all of our problems in cities. So I'm not saying this because I think cars are awesome. I'm saying this because I think we've put the cart before the horse with a pedestrian mall here. I went to this book, Walkable Cities by Jeff Speck, who's this urban thinker, also not an advocate for cars. And he looks at like pedestrian malls around the world and how great they are, but then he looks at North America where they just have not worked. And he says that, there were like 200 of them after like about 1970 something. And most of them, about like 3/4 have shut down, and the ones that are around are like ours. They're kind of moribund, they're in need of investment, and they're just not working. He talks about how, well, this is Jeff Speck, what he has to say. It would seem that there is only one thing more destructive to the health of our downtowns than welcoming cars unconditionally, and that is getting rid of them entirely. The proper response to obesity is not to stop eating. The key is to welcome cars in the proper number and at the proper speed. I think in North America, we are addicted to our cars. We can't get rid of them that easily. We need to have a reason. You need to have a population density and an activity density in your downtown before a pedestrian mall is going to work. And by just putting a pedestrian mall there, you're kind of like, it's a gimmick, right? Like it's not bringing the people. It needs to be there to respond to the people. So I think I'm not saying throw it open, make the speed limit 60 on Scarth Street. I'm saying there was like a middle option that was kind of, narrow the road, welcome some cars at a reduced speed, allow some stop and go parking, and, keep it like a pedestrian focused space, but a pedestrian focused space where cars can get through. One of the things in the downtown plan was getting rid of our one-ways. We didn't do that. We've snarled up the traffic downtown, and I think that that's causing one of our problems.
Interesting. Vanessa, what's your take?
So I'm on the side of keeping it closed to vehicles. I think in 1975 we were within other cities that were doing this, but we were also kind of ahead of our time. And closing that down, and now we have cities across Canada, across North America that are introducing these pedestrian-only zones, and this is tying in with the recognition that having spaces that people don't need to worry about cars idling or cars driving through, and that people can feel entirely safe within those spaces is actually something which is highly amenable to creating that vibrancy and the programming that we are all kind of talking about, wanting to see more of. So, I think the problem that the businesses might be facing in Scarth and on that mall and is a broader kind of problem. And I always ask the question of, what are the benefits and costs of doing something? And when I look at the social, I'm like, this is not going to benefit anybody. It's going to take away from that vibrancy. It doesn't really create the kind of public life that I think is necessary in along that street. When I think about the environmental, it kind of puts us back in a different direction, and now we're introducing cars in one of the only spaces in the city that can have that separation from them. And then I think about economic, and that's the one that comes up a lot for people. But in every study that I have encountered, what the finding is that the more pedestrianization, the more active transportation that you employ along streets, the greater the business revenue. So, it's not a problem that we don't have cars. The problem is much bigger than Scarth Street. And it's a funny way of saying it, but I think we have all of these intertwining issues that are facing the downtown. And the Scarth Street is like one little piece in that broader puzzle. And it's a piece that I actually think is necessary to fight to preserve. And, there was 6,600 people that filled out that survey recently and 90% of them said, let's keep Scarth Street. So I'm going to challenge those people to actually come to the downtown. If we want to keep these spaces, and we have to use them, and we have to love them, and we have to want to be there, because that will then allow all of the other fantastic things to happen. And, we have a houseless issue. We need to address that as a city. We need to get a permanent emergency shelter. We need to get affordable housing. And so these are all part of that same issue. I think.
It's all these little conversations that really are about one big
Yes.
one big conversation with lots of offshoots. Judith, I want to ask you about something else that's being talked about, and I'm wondering what you know about the rules around office buildings being built in other areas of the city, even though the vacancy rate in downtown is rather high, because that's another way that City Hall can influence where people are working and spending time. And so what is Regina doing about that right now?
Before I answer that question, I will comment
very
shortly on Scarth.
Yeah.
I do want to just make everyone aware that the road, Scarth Street, is going to have to be torn up.
Yeah.
Everything underneath that road is outdated and needs to be replaced. There are maybe 3 trees that are salvageable. We had a horticulturalist come out and take a look at those trees. And all of the planters are, the 3 trees that are left, the planters are overgrown. Like, the root ball can't grow anymore. So this street is going to have to be torn up. It's about what we do when we put it back together. So I think when people keep talking about keep it as exactly as it is, it's not possible. Like, we are going to have to improve it. And I think anyone who wears high-heeled shoes and walks on that street risks a twisted ankle because the cobblestone is breaking. I know because I painted it last year, and we were filling in a lot of non-brick. We were painting mud. So I think just everyone needs to just keep in mind that regardless of what this survey response is, there will be construction on that street eventually.
Yeah.
When
we
the
could have made
budget
the focus of this show aging infrastructure, because
God, yes.
this is connected to that
Right.
too. And have we maintained our infrastructure?
Right.
Okay, but let's just get to office building space vacancies and what the city's doing in that regard.
So since 2012, the city's had an office development policy that limits medium density and high density office building to the downtown core area, which I believe went from College to 4th, and then Albert to Broad, so a little bit smaller area. And then medium office development was allowed in 2 specific office area zones, Harbor Landing, and I think there was some space out in the north area of the city. What the city is looking at doing now is relaxing that policy. Typically, the policy is in place when the office vacancy rate is, I believe, below 6%. We're at 17% right now. So Regina Downtown has always been a proponent of this office development policy, keeping that core, that critical mass of office and employment base in our downtown. And we are very concerned about the potential relaxation of that policy.
Okay, that could be a whole other show right there. I want to get to one big question, and then we're going to try to rapidly get through a few callers who've been patiently waiting. So Anna sent us an email, and I'm going to put this question to all 3 of you. Why is it important to have a vibrant downtown? Paul, do you want to start with that?
Sure. I think there are sort of softer reasons, like downtown is the heart of the city. It's where people gather. It's where people come together. But in terms of just pure dollars and cents, there is a table buried on the city's website that looks at property tax revenue per hectare in the city broken down by neighborhood. And the downtown generates the most property tax per hectare compared to any other neighborhood by a long margin. Like there are some like high density residential areas that produce comparable, but well, not even comparable. Like the downtown is an economic engine for your city. And if that starts to fall apart, well, like we lose that revenue. We don't have it, and we can't run a wider city. So a downtown that thrives is crucial to having a functioning city.
Vanessa, what would you add to that?
I was going to say the same thing, but I will.
That speaks to how important that is.
It is very important. I will add that, having something in the core, the center of the city that everybody can access in different kinds of ways, and to have that as a meeting up point also makes a lot of sense. So, it allows, especially if it has the employment kind of center, that more people can walk or bike or scoot to work, and to also buy things, and it becomes that functioning kind of, I'm going to say it, heart of the city. But yeah, that's what I'll add maybe.
It is, yeah. Judith, what would you say? Why is it important to have a vibrant downtown?
I'll throw some numbers behind Paul's statement. Downtown is 1% of the land area, 4% of the assessed value of the entire city, and contributes 7% of the tax base. So yeah, you want to keep that golden goose nice and plump there, because downtown punches above its weight in terms of putting tax revenue into the coffers that help support all the services that are provided to the rest of the city.
Judith, have you been thinking about the money lost because of not having the folk festival there this year? The farmers market had to move to the Real District because of construction. Are you thinking about those revenue losses?
That's always top of mind. Regardless of revenue loss, it's that vibrancy loss. It's the people that come downtown and have that positive experience. However, again, we're struggling with the construction, and that's kind of created situations that make it a lot more challenging or more expensive for some of those entities to operate in our downtown. Certainly, we're going to continue to have conversations with them to talk about future years, see if there are ways, if they've taken a year off from downtown, what can we do, what can we start doing to put infrastructure or plans in place that they can come back next year rather than waiting till after construction is done.
Okay, let's get to some of our callers who have been waiting patiently. James joins us right now in Saskatoon. Hello, James.
Hi, Lisa. I was just thinking about something. Like one of the things that I wanted to say was that our prairie cities, we treat them like a great big floating raft that can always be extended, instead of treating them like places like Victoria and Montreal, which are islands, and the only way you can densify them or get more people in is build up. That's one thing. The other thing is that in my experience with Regina, it is a government town. There are federal government offices there, provincial government offices there, and business and labor organization offices there. And all of those jobs in all of those offices are transitory. Every time a union gets a new manager or a new president, staff changes. The same thing with big business organizations like the Chamber of Commerce. The same thing with provincial governments and federal governments. Even with the like the ministers, their staffs change all the time. They go and live in Regina for a short time. Their offices are downtown, but they're not permanent residents there. And that's
so you think that changes the culture? That changes the culture of a place?
It does. It does, because if you have you have annual meetings of all kinds, right? Mm-hmm. And so what happens is you get groups of people that come in for a few days, and they're looking for something to do, right? Mm-hmm. And if there's nothing to do downtown, they're looking at the outskirts.
Yep.
They're looking at the clubs and stuff on the outskirts. Whereas places like Victoria and Montreal, you don't have outskirts. You've only got so much space. If you want more people there, you have to change the buildings.
Yeah. Some good points, James. I want to get... Oh, sorry. I hate having to interrupt, but we got two more callers on the line. But yeah, finish up, James.
Okay, the thing that I would look at is try and if you're going to build offices outside, try and get the provincial, the government and non-governmental organizations to move staff out there and bring other people in, other businesses in, to live or to work and live downtown.
Okay.
And move the bureaucracies out.
Okay,
Anyway,
good point.
that's my
James,
idea.
thanks. Yeah, take care. So we got Florence on the line in Regina. And again, Florence, we're crunched for time, so I'll let you make a point or two. Hi, Florence.
Hi there, thanks. I'm a big fan of Regina's downtown, but too many things are going wrong. First, the work on 11th Avenue. It's in its third year. Why is it taking so long? The city says it's complicated, but whole buildings go up in less time. Then there's the state of the sidewalks. They're difficult enough to walk on if you're able-bodied, but if you have any kind of disability, they are impossible. Finally, the Scarth Street Mall. It's a fantastic space. Fix what needs to be fixed. Sometimes I think the city of Regina is trying to destroy Regina's downtown. Thank you.
Thanks, Florence. Let's go to one more caller quickly. Gayleen in Saskatoon. Hi, Gayleen. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that we should look at other places that have successful downtowns. Toronto has an amazing downtown. There's the business district and then the other neighborhoods that are funky and fun and just have a ton of things to do. And they have food places where you can buy not just meals from restaurants, but ingredients. Like there's several bulk food places downtown in Toronto, and they're busy.
Yeah. Good point, Gayleen. Thank you for calling. So on the topic of food, Marion emails, I can't see people wanting to live in downtown Regina at this point. There are currently no coffee shops open past 4:30. Also, there are no places to buy groceries. The farmers market isn't even downtown on Saturday anymore. If you go to other cities, these basics are available in multiple spots throughout the city's cores. Thanks, Marion, for emailing. We could keep this conversation going, but 1 o'clock is when we have to end the program. And so I just basically have time to thank all of you and hope we can continue the conversation at another time because those decisions are going to be made and there will be lots to talk about over the next weeks and months. So, Vanessa, thanks to you for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Paul, good to talk to you today. Thank you.
This is great. Thank you.
Yeah, and Judith, good to have you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that was Vanessa Matthews, Associate Professor in the Department of Geography and Environmental Studies at the University of Regina. Paul Deshane covers civic politics in Regina and is the host of the community radio show and podcast, the Queen City Improvement Bureau. Judith Veresuk is the Executive Director of the Regina Downtown Business Improvement District. Thanks to everyone who called. If you didn't get on and you still want to share your thoughts about Regina's downtown, Saskatoon's, or another city, feel free, 1-800-661-7540.